Hello in Comp 1. This is a grammar lesson. I'm making a video especially if you're absent so you can kind of see what is our first grammar strategy. I will be referencing something called AWUBS all throughout the semester. How I teach this lesson is very similar to how I will teach lessons about dashes and semicolons. And also your first assessment is going to be, like your first major paper, is going to be a memoir and you'll have to use grammar. So I want to get started. You're going to reference this PowerPoint, and then you will also need access to this document, and you could fill this out digitally. If you have a printer, you could also print it and then take pictures and send me what you created, but this is the packet that we're going to be working off of. So to start class, I had students take out a notebook and kind of pick one of these prompts and write something narrative. So the goal in Unit 1 is to tell a story, and these are different things that you could talk about. You could talk about fears, you could talk about, reflecting on your younger self in childhood, you could talk about a location or setting that has been really important. So for instance, I have a cabin that we used to visit up north as a family. You could talk about a single event that's strongly shaped who you are. And I'm going to have you pause it and kind of review these prompts, pick one, and then do a quick write. Alright, so welcome back. Hopefully you quick writed a little bit about these memoirs. What I'd like you to do is look at the actual writing that you produced and do you use any of these word choices? If you do, you might notice they start words. So for instance, when I was little, we used to go up north all the time. Or before we could go up north, we had to make sure school was excused. And if you're using any of these words, these are AWUBS words, also referenced as trigger words, and hopefully if you use them, you use a comma. So that's my goal today, is to teach you what are the words, how do you use them, and why. So homework-wise, today is a grammar lesson. The AWUBS write, that is a typo, will be due Friday by the end of the day, and it is digital, so you'll turn it in digitally. And then Monday, you guys should finish reading Night Chapter 1. So if you are not able to be at school, realize I will post the, hopefully I will find and post a digital copy of Night for you to read. So these are AWUBS. What are they? Why do they improve writing? AWUBS are a grammar device. I like to teach grammar as a style technique, and so that's my goal today, is to teach you how to use these for style. Unit 1, just so you guys know why we're doing this. You guys are going to be writing a narrative or a memoir that's interesting, engaging, and purposeful. I want to see good content about your life, I statements, first-person stories, real-life experiences. When you write that story, I also want to see good content in craft. Remember, craft is how you write it. So grammar devices is craft, word choicing, how you break up your paragraphs. I want it to be interesting because of what you tell me, but also interesting because how you write it. When you consider authors throughout the entire year, especially books like Night, those are people who have written stories with powerful content and lessons. Night is about Holocaust, it's about surviving, it's about father-son relationships, but also he writes it using very purposeful craft. Like he does some poetry in that book, he does short chapters, he does some very important imagery. So I want you to think about that during Unit 1. So I asked the class to kind of think about their childhood, because that's going to be your writing prompt. You will write about your childhood in a paragraph, and you will be using AWUBS sentences. That is going to be the assignment. So think for a few minutes about your childhood. This is a picture of me. So I remember going to my grandparents' house a lot. That's their place, and I remember spending time with them. I remember kind of the adventures we had over the summer. I remember going to the playground and loving Waddles Park playground. So as you can see, I'm just thinking out some things that I remember and know. So I will read a picture book called When I Was Little. I don't have access to that digitally, so I'll just paraphrase. The picture book is, it just repeats the phrase, when I was little. So when I was little, I got my hair cut. When I was little, I used to go to daycare. When I was little, my mom and dad told me no. So the goal of that short story, picture book, is just to have you think about when you were little. And so I'm asking kids to brainstorm some sentences because the goal is maybe you pick one of these to write about. So when I was little, raccoons were terrifying. When I was little, Kool-Aid mustaches were standard. When I was little, we went to the ER a lot because we usually got stitches and we were crazy. There was 4 of us. When I was little, the summers seemed to last forever. So hopefully you're noticing the repetition, but you might also notice that this word when creates a natural pause. So when I was little, comma, McDonald's was a feast. When I was little, pause, or comma, I couldn't tie my shoe. And that's an AWUBS sentence for you. And that's kind of the prompt that you'll be writing about. So what are AWUBS? We talked and did a lot of pair shares about, our memories and when we were little. But ultimately, on the handout, you'll notice these sample sentences. So if I click, you'll see them right here. What I'd like you to do is jot down 2 observations about the structure and organization of these sample sentences. So pause and take care of that, and then I will tell you what's going on. So grammatically, I notice each of these sentences uses a comma. It tends to take place towards the middle of the sentence. I also notice they're using words at the start that kind of trigger the comma placement. So unless, since, and because. I also notice the first part of the sentence is not a complete thought, like it's starting to get somewhere, but I notice what happens after completes the thoughts. So unless I finish my dinner, oh, my parents won't let me play outside. Since I had 3 siblings, I always had somebody to talk to. Because kids are ignorant, I wish I could go back in time. So as you can see, these first chunks are what we're going to call dependent clauses. So going back to the PowerPoint, you'll fill out in the box. A dependent clause is an incomplete sentence. It doesn't make sense. It's not a complete thought. And these are bad in the English world. You might notice they're called fragments. And what happens is the ideas you're trying to tell me don't make sense because the sentence does not have a complete idea. An independent clause, you do need to keep the vocab in mind because that is me as an English teacher telling you that you're using a complete sentence. It does make sense. So I gave you guys several sentences down here. What I want you to do is label if they are a good sentence or a bad sentence. I told kids to put like a smiley face or an IC for independent clause or good sentence. And then I said put a sad face if it's a dependent clause or an incomplete sentence. And then after you label them, can you fix the dependent clauses? And if you notice, they're going to have a trigger word. And you're also going to need a comma. And you're going to need to add some info to make the sentence flow and then do a period. So take a minute to do that and then I'll walk and talk out these sample sentences. All right, welcome back. So, when my mom made dinner, what? That's not a complete thought, right? That's a dependent clause. When is your AWUBS? You would add a comma and you would do this. When my mom made dinner, comma, I loved eating spaghetti. The next one, same issue, right? It's not quite complete. It is a dependent clause, sad face, thumbs down. Before I saw the book fly towards my face, comma, I ducked. Now it's complete. I was a wild child. That's a happy face. That is actually a complete independent clause in a good sentence. You don't need to do anything to that one other than add a period. If you've ever eaten a hot pepper, doesn't make sense, need to add. So if you have ever eaten a hot pepper, comma, you probably drank some milk. If is going to be my little AWUBS or trigger word. And this one caused some problems for kids, but it was funny. It was funny is a simple sentence, but it is complete. So what's happening is it's missing context, but pretend this is what you're reading. I got a new puppy. That puppy tripped all the time. The puppy loved to drag different toys to me, and oftentimes she would fall a little bit over a blankie. Period. It was funny. Period. So do you see there that sentence does work? So that is actually an independent clause. So the next portion is I got some grammar notes that you can fill in off of this next slide. So hopefully you're getting familiar with this sentence structure stuff that's happening, because now I want you to realize that these are dependent clauses. AWUBS create a dependent clause, and your job is to add a comma and add and fix it so it is an independent clause. So copy these notes. There's 3 big rules. AWUBS start off a dependent clause, meaning that it's incomplete, it needs more information, you need to fix it. All right, that's just good English. But I personally like you to use AWUBS because they intro more information and they basically create style and interesting sentence structure. You look smart because you're using a comma, you're telling me some information, kind of like a teaser, and then you comma and add to it to make it a complete thought. These are going to be our AWUBS words: although, after, as, whenever, while and when, until, unless, because, before, if, instead, and since. So you're going to have to make a sample sentence and pick one of these down at the bottom of your page. So while I was home, comma, I took a nap. Until I get my homework done, comma, my mom won't take me to Maurice's. Since it is Thursday, comma, I can't wait for the weekend. So you'll use one of these to start a sentence. You'll have to add more information, but you'll need a comma in order to separate the dependent and independent clause. Now, because is a tricky one. Because some kids have been told never start a sentence with because. For my class, you can. So because I'm teaching AWUBS, comma, it's okay to use them. But just remember, if the because occurs in the middle of a sentence, like she was sleepy because she stayed up too late, that's not an AWUBS. It's not starting any type of sentence. It's actually a connector word in between 2 different kind of emerging thoughts. So don't forget the AWUBS phrasing that I just talked about, because that is going to help you figure out your commas. You'll kind of hear a natural pause, and then you need to use a comma and add to the sentence to make it complete. So what I want you to do is fill out this document. It has been posted on Google Classroom. You're going to write a 1-paragraph response to when you were little. So here's mine. I talk about raccoons. So I'm going to have you read this to yourself, and you're going to write your own when I was little memoir. It's only a paragraph, and you need to use at least 3 AWUBS, which I do here. I know how to use a fanboy, so some kids might know other grammar devices, and you're allowed to do that as well. If not, you should use 3 to 4 AWUBS total. And you're going to write your paragraph here, and you need to highlight the grammar that you use. The next thing you need to do is you need to create a bulleted list of things that you've learned from this video about AWUBS. So I learned AWUBS are a part of a dependent and independent clause. I learned that AWUBS need commas. And you're going to fill out this document for this rubric. So 10 points is just how you talk about your memoir, how you talk about when you were little. Another 10 points is using the grammar devices. So my system is basically, I believe all kids should shoot for a 3, which is a B. So if you want a 3, you would do 3 AWUBS. My belief system is if you want an A, you have to overachieve, which means you would do 4. So just realize the rubric kind of helps you. 3 AWUBS or 4 AWUBS. So if you want an A, do 4 AWUBS sentences. Make sure you identify the grammar in the digital document by highlighting it. And then finally, make sure you offer a nice list of 3 to 4 things when it comes to the rules and expectations, and that can be just like a bulleted list. So hopefully you have gotten a sense of a new grammar device and you're able to use it. Reference this handout as you go, and then we just concluded class by talking out a little bit what your prompts were and what AWUBS meant to the students. So I hope that you learn something new when it comes to grammar, and you also experiment with memoirs. Good luck.